At 75 years old, Ernesto Silva finally decided to organize the old shed at the back of his house. Among rusted tools and forgotten furniture, a mysterious shape was hiding under a faded blue tarp in the darkest corner of the place. When his trembling hands pulled away the dusty fabric, they revealed the unmistakable silhouette of an automobile he hadn't seen in over 2 decades. It was his late brother Roberto's red Jaguar E-Type, covered by a thick layer of dust that told the story of 20 years of abandonment. But what would truly change his life wasn't in the elegant bodywork or the surprisingly preserved leather interior. On the passenger seat, a brown leather briefcase had been waiting for 2 decades, keeping secrets that Roberto had carefully preserved. Inside that dusty briefcase, Ernesto discovered documents that would prove something extraordinary. This wasn't just a forgotten old car, but one of only 12 examples produced with a specific configuration, making it incredibly rare in the global market. The certificates of authenticity, photographs from the original delivery at the dealership, and papers signed by Jaguar factory engineers themselves in England revealed the true identity of that dust-covered treasure. But it was the sealed envelope with red wax that contained the most impressive document of all. When Ernesto opened it with trembling hands, he found an appraisal that made his heart race, £800,000 sterling. And that was only the beginning of the most extraordinary discovery of his life. A personal letter from Roberto, written specifically for him, revealed that his brother had planned everything carefully, knowing that one day this car would change the entire family's destiny. But not even Roberto could have imagined what specialists would discover when they finally examined that forgotten Jaguar. What began as simple cleaning in a dusty shed would transform into the discovery of a treasure worth more than £1 million, hidden for 20 years in the back of his own house. A story that proves how sometimes the greatest treasures are right under our noses, patiently waiting to be discovered by hands that know how to recognize their true value. But did Ernesto have the courage to sell the last gift left by his beloved brother? And what else had Roberto hidden in that mysterious briefcase? Ernesto Silva, at 75 years old, had spent the entire morning organizing belongings accumulated over decades in the old shed at the back of his property. The sun filtered through dusty windows, creating golden rays that danced between spiderwebs and stacked boxes. It was a task he had been putting off for years, but age made him think about leaving everything more organized for his children. Among rusty tools and furniture covered by yellowed sheets, something caught his attention in the darkest corner of the shed. A large, mysterious shape was hidden under a faded blue tarp, forgotten for so long that he himself couldn't remember what was there. The smell of mold and old. Gasoline hung in the air, awakening a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time. With slow but determined steps, Ernesto headed toward the mysterious object. His trembling hands began to pull the heavy tarp, gradually revealing the unmistakable silhouette of an automobile. Decades of dust flew through the air as he first uncovered a chrome bumper, then an elegant grille, and finally the characteristic round headlights. It was a 1961 Jaguar E-Type convertible, painted in a red that had once been vibrant, but was now covered by a thick layer of dirt. Ernesto felt his heart race as he recognized the vehicle that had belonged to his late younger brother, Roberto, a passionate collector of classic cars. Roberto had died in an accident more than 20 years ago, and the car had been forgotten in that shed ever since. Memories flooded back like a torrent. The adventures they had lived together in that Jaguar, the trips along rural roads, the antique car meetings they attended every weekend. Carefully, Ernesto opened the driver's door, which gave way with a metallic creak that echoed through the silent shed. The beige leather interior was surprisingly well preserved, protected from humidity by the vehicle's well-sealed body. The characteristic smell of leather mixed with oil and old gasoline created a nostalgic atmosphere that instantly transported him back to the 1960s. On the passenger seat, a brown leather briefcase caught his attention, especially since he didn't remember having seen it before. The briefcase was closed by a leather strap that, despite the years, still maintained its strength. Inside the glove compartment, he found the car's original keys, still attached to a keychain with the initials RS engraved in golden metal. Ernesto picked up the briefcase with reverence, feeling the weight of the documents inside. His hands trembled not only from age, but from the emotion of discovering something that had belonged to his beloved brother. He decided to take the briefcase inside the house, where he would have better lighting to examine its contents with proper care. The walk to the house seemed longer than normal, carrying that unexpected treasure in his arms. His wife, Maria, was preparing lunch when he entered the kitchen with the dusty briefcase. She looked at him with curiosity, noticing the expression of excitement mixed with nostalgia on her husband's face. "I found something incredible in the shed," said Ernesto, placing the briefcase on the kitchen table carefully. Maria approached, wiping her hands on her apron before touching the old briefcase. "It's Roberto's, isn't it?" she asked, immediately recognizing the elegant style that characterized her brother-in-law. Ernesto nodded, still processing the discovery of the car and now the mysterious briefcase. Together, they sat at the table, and Ernesto began to untie the leather strap with careful fingers. The sound of the leather being manipulated echoed in the silence of the kitchen, where only the tick-tock of the wall clock marked time. Maria held her husband's hand for a moment, understanding the emotional importance of that moment for him. Both knew they were about to discover something significant, something that Roberto had considered important enough to carefully store along with his most precious car. Expectation hung in the air like a loaded cloud, ready to reveal long-forgotten secrets. The briefcase opened to reveal an organized collection of documents, photographs, and official papers meticulously preserved. The first item that caught Ernesto's attention was a series of authenticity certificates and ownership documents, all related to the Jaguar E-Type he had just discovered. Roberto had been more meticulous than he had imagined, keeping every receipt, every maintenance document, and every certification that proved the vehicle's originality and provenance. Among the papers, he found black and white photographs of the car being delivered new at the dealership, with Roberto smiling beside the gleaming vehicle. The images showed not only the car, but the entire acquisition process, including photos of the Jaguar factory in England and documents signed by the engineers responsible for production. It was evident that this was not an ordinary Jaguar E-Type, but something much more special. As he continued examining the documents, Ernesto discovered that the car had been one of the last models produced from the first series, with only 3,200 kilometers driven since new. Roberto had acquired the vehicle directly from the factory through special contacts, and all the documents proved its authenticity and exceptional rarity. Even more impressive was discovering that it was one of only 12 models produced with a specific engine configuration and interior finish, making it incredibly rare in the worldwide classic car market. The certificates indicated that the car had been evaluated by British specialists in 1985, when it was already worth a considerable fortune. Maria watched, in silence, while her husband read each document, noticing how his eyes sparkled with each new discovery. With each page turned, it became clearer that Roberto had left behind much more than just an old car. The most impressive document was kept in a sealed envelope, sealed with red wax that still bore the mark of Roberto's ring. Inside the envelope, Ernesto found a recent appraisal certificate, dated just 2 years before his brother's death. The document, issued by an auction house specializing in classic cars in London, valued the Jaguar E-Type at an amount that made Ernesto almost drop the coffee cup that Maria had placed beside him. The appraisal indicated a market value of £800,000 sterling, considering not only the model's rarity, but also its exceptional state of conservation and the complete documentation that accompanied it. Attached to the certificate was a letter from the auction house, expressing interest in acquiring the vehicle and offering exclusive representation for its sale in international auctions. Maria held her husband's arm when she saw the shocked expression on his face. £800,000, murmured Ernesto, mentally converting the value to reais and realizing it was a fortune that would completely change the family's life. The document explained in detail why that specific Jaguar was so valuable. Besides its extreme rarity, it possessed all original parts, had never suffered accidents, and maintained the factory paint intact under the accumulated dirt. The auction house mentioned that cars with these characteristics were sought after by the most demanding collectors in the world, especially those with documentation as complete as what Roberto had preserved. There was Also a list of potential interested buyers, including automotive museums and renowned international private collectors. The letter dated from 1998, 2 years before Roberto's death, suggesting that he had considered selling the car but never got to do it. Ernesto realized there was another smaller envelope inside the briefcase, this one with his own name written in Roberto's elegant handwriting. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope and found a personal letter that his brother had written specifically for him. The letter began by explaining that, should something happen to Roberto, the car, and all documents should pass to Ernesto, but only when he was prepared to discover them. Roberto wrote about his plans to completely restore the Jaguar and then sell it to secure the family's future, but life hadn't given him enough time to execute these plans. In the letter, he explained every detail about the car's value, guiding Ernesto on how to proceed if he decided to sell it. The letter's last lines were what touched the old man's heart the most. "Brother, this car represents not just money, but our shared passion for classic automobiles. Use it to fulfill the dreams we always had together." Maria wiped away a tear as she watched her husband read the letter from his deceased brother. In the following days, Ernesto couldn't stop thinking about the extraordinary discovery he had made. He decided to research more about the current classic car market, discovering that values had increased significantly since the last appraisal made in 1998. Specialized websites and auction houses confirmed that first series Jaguar E-types, especially those with complete documentation and low mileage, were being sold for values even higher than those mentioned in Roberto's documents. Some recent sales showed similar cars being sold for more than £1 million at international auctions. With each search, Ernesto became more convinced that he had discovered not just a car, but a true treasure that had been hidden in his own shed for 2 decades. Maria accompanied him in these discoveries, both carefully planning the next steps to be taken. Ernesto decided to contact the same auction house mentioned in Roberto's documentation, discovering that the company still existed and had become even more prestigious in the international market. The specialist who took his call showed immediate interest when Ernesto mentioned owning a 1961 Jaguar E-Type with complete first ownership documentation. The auction house requested detailed photographs and copies of the documentation, promising to send a specialized appraiser to examine the vehicle personally. During the phone conversation, the specialist explained that the classic car market had undergone extraordinary appreciation in recent decades, especially for models like the Jaguar E-Type in exceptional conditions. He mentioned that cars with the configuration described in Roberto's documents rarely appeared on the market, making them extremely coveted by collectors worldwide. While awaiting the appraiser's visit, Ernesto began the delicate process of cleaning the Jaguar, removing decades of accumulated dust and dirt. With help from Maria and a grandson who understood cars, he carefully washed the body, gradually revealing the original red paint that shone like new under the dirt. The leather interior was treated with special products, recovering its original color and softness surprisingly. The engine, which had been protected by a special cover that Roberto had installed, was in exceptional condition, needing only a basic service to run again. With each hour of work, the car revealed more of its original beauty, confirming all the information contained in the documentation about its exceptional state of conservation. Ernesto's grandson was impressed with the quality of the restoration that Roberto had done over the years. The appraiser arrived a week later, a British specialist who had traveled especially to examine the Jaguar. His reaction upon seeing the car was one of genuine surprise and professional admiration. For 3 hours, he examined every detail of the vehicle, checked chassis numbers, analyzed engine components, and verified the authenticity of each part. His preliminary assessment confirmed everything that was documented. It was indeed one of the rarest and best-preserved Jaguar E-types he had examined in his 30-year career. The specialist explained that the combination of rarity, state of conservation, low mileage, and complete documentation made that specimen extraordinarily valuable. He suggested that the car be transported to England to participate in a specialized auction where it could achieve maximum market value. The final appraisal surprised even the experienced specialist. The Jaguar was valued in a range between £1.2 and £1.5 million, considering its exceptional rarity and practically perfect state of conservation. The official appraisal document detailed each aspect that contributed to this extraordinary value, from complete originality to the impeccable historical documentation maintained by Roberto. The specialist mentioned that there were only 5 other known specimens in the world with similar characteristics, and none of them possessed documentation as complete as what accompanied Ernesto's car. The auction house offered exclusive representation, guaranteeing international promotion and participation from the most serious collectors in the world market. Ernesto and Maria looked at each other, realizing they were facing an opportunity that would completely change the family's future, exactly as Roberto had planned in his loving letter. The decision to sell the Jaguar was not easy for Ernesto, who felt a deep emotional connection with the car that represented shared memories with Roberto. For weeks, he and Maria talked about the possibilities that sale could provide: financial security in old age, guaranteed university education for the grandchildren, and the fulfillment of dreams that had been postponed for decades due to financial limitations. Ernesto remembered his brother's words in the letter, encouraging him to use the car to fulfill the dreams they had always had together. After much reflection, he decided that Roberto would be proud, knowing that his foresight and care with the car were providing a better life for the entire family. The sale would be a way to honor his brother's memory and his passion for classic automobiles. The preparation process for the auction took 2 months, during which the Jaguar received conservative restoration to preserve its originality. Specialists worked carefully to maintain all original characteristics while ensuring the car was in perfect working condition. The auction house prepared a special catalog highlighting the vehicle's unique history, including photographs of Ernesto's discoveries and testimonials about the exceptional preservation carried out by Roberto. The complete documentation was digitized and made available to potential buyers around the world, generating immediate interest from collectors in Europe, the United States, and Asia. Ernesto followed each step of the process, learning about a world of collectors he had never known, but which Roberto frequented with passion. The auction day arrived with specialized media coverage that surprised Ernesto. Journalists from international automotive magazines wanted to know the discovery story and interview the man who had found one of the world's rarest Jaguar E-types in his own shed. Ernesto told the story with emotion, always mentioning Roberto's care and foresight, who had preserved not only the car, but all the necessary documentation to prove its exceptional value. The live auction broadcast allowed him to follow the bids from his home in Brazil, with Maria beside him, holding his hand during the most tense moments. Buyer interest exceeded all expectations, with bids coming from different continents. The auctioneer's hammer fell at £1.4 million, a value that left Ernesto temporarily speechless. The buyer was an American collector who had participated in the bidding by telephone, competing against 2 other European collectors equally determined to acquire that exceptional specimen. The auction house congratulated Ernesto for the extraordinary preservation of the documentation and the impeccable condition in which the car had been maintained during all those years. The sale money, converted to reais, represented an amount that Ernesto had never imagined possessing, sufficient to completely transform his family's life for several generations. That night, he and Maria toasted not only the successful sale but mainly Roberto's memory, whose passion for classic cars had become a lasting gift for the entire family. Months later, Ernesto used part of the money to renovate the house where he had lived for 50 years, created educational funds for all his grandchildren, and still saved a considerable amount to guarantee a peaceful old age beside Maria. He also decided to transform part of the shed where he found the Jaguar into a small family museum, displaying photographs of the discovery, copies of historical documentation, and Roberto's personal objects. The space became a place of memory where the family gathered to remember shared stories and the importance of preserving family history. Ernesto frequently received visitors interested in knowing the discovery story, always proudly telling about his younger brother's meticulousness and foresight. The discovery of that dust-covered Jaguar had become much more than a simple sale. It had transformed into the story of how love for classic cars and family care can create legacies that cross generations, exactly as Roberto had dreamed when he carefully stored all those documents along with his automotive treasure.